All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Cybersecurity might sound like something that's reserved for IT professionals or large corporations, but in reality, it's something that affects us all every day. In my role as a financial advisor, I see firsthand how today's scams are increasingly sophisticated, emotional, and personal. My responsibility isn't just to help clients grow their wealth, it's also to help them protect it. Okay. You should all see a whole bunch of legalese.
Yes.
So before we kick things off then, I want to take a moment to note that this presentation is being provided for educational purposes only. Investment advisory services are offered through Planned Financial Services LLC with the DBA Return on Life Wealth Partners, an SEC registered investment advisor. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Now, moving on from that, I'm pleased to introduce today's guest speakers who will bring valuable perspectives on this important topic. We'll first have Fred Franks, Chief Strategy Officer at Fit Technologies, who will share his insights on how businesses and individuals can strengthen their cybersecurity frameworks in a rapidly changing digital landscape. We're also joined by Jared Long, Senior Vice President at Westfield Bank, who will discuss how financial institutions are adapting to new threats and what clients can do to stay vigilant. We're grateful to have them both with us today to share their experience and insights. Before we have Fred kick off, I'd like to begin by sharing just a personal story on the human side of cybersecurity. Uh, this is pretty close to home. We had a longtime client call our office one afternoon who had requested an unusually large withdrawal. I know this person very well, but the amount, the urgency in her voice, both of these were out of character to me and something just didn't feel right. I asked her a few questions. Was she sure? Was this decision being made freely or under pressure? And as the conversation went on, I still had concerns. Ultimately, we decided to pause the transaction for one day just to give her some time to reflect. The next morning, she calls back, relieved and a little bit shaken. She realized that she'd been caught in a scam. The fraudsters had created a sense of panic and secrecy that nearly worked. But because we pressed pause, she had the space to step back, think clearly, and stop the transfer before any harm was done. And that experience reminded me of something important. Cybersecurity isn't just about firewalls or passwords. It's about people. It's about trust, communication, and the confidence to speak up when something doesn't feel right. Even the most experienced investors can be vulnerable when emotions are high. Scammers are experts at creating urgency, fear, or authority, conditions that override rational thinking. What protected this client wasn't technology, it was our relationship and her courage to admit something felt off. And that's why today's conversation is so important. Building awareness and a support network are two of the strongest defenses against cybercrime. As advisors, we can spot red flags and act as a safeguard when something feels unusual. But clients also play a key role by staying informed, taking time before making financial decisions, and knowing who to call when something doesn't quite feel right. Over the next hour, we'll talk through practical ways to recognize scams, strengthen your digital security, and protect your personal and financial information. Together, we can create an environment that creates awareness and trust and keep our financial lives much more secure. And with that, I'll give it over to you, Fred.
Excellent. Thanks for the introduction. I don't know if you can all see me, but I can definitely see my volumes going. So uh, I'll get started. Well, I wanted to thank everybody. I am excited to talk about cybersecurity. I know it's not something that is exciting to be involved in, but it is really important. And knowing that you're protected and knowing that you're lowering your risk is an exciting conversation to have. And so I think what Chelsea, you just kind of opened up with is that the approach that the bad actors are taking, they're getting better every single day. And what we're seeing, while the tools are getting more comprehensive, it goes both ways. Those tools for the bad actors also are getting more sophisticated. I don't know if any of you have had this chance to see what AI is able to accomplish nowadays, where it can take someone's voice and modulate that to be exactly on cue. It could take my voice and make it sound just like it's me. Like you wouldn't even know if this were true. I promise you, I'm in real time here, but it can make little mistakes that sound accurate, that make it sound more human, and could be reading from a script to do that. It also could do that now with video. So when you talk about urgency, it may not even be urgency where I have some incriminating things that we captured from your computer, send me money. It could also be, mom, dad, I'm not feeling well, something's wrong, or somebody has me and I'm held hostage, you need to send money. There's all those sorts of tricks that people are the bad actors are taking to get money. And I think one of the things that always should be that red flag for us, just to start off, is that sense of urgency to take action. When we're having this urgency of now, um, that should be the biggest alarm for us. Why do I need to do this right now? Why can't this take a week? If you're making a major decision to purchase something, certainly you're not typically making that in the moment. You have an hour to make a decision, sort of thing, right? So that sense of urgency is generally the biggest red flag that I would throw out there. I want to start off with another story, because I think we learn through story, and this is another real world example. And I met earlier this year with a business owner, and he told me, share this with as many people as possible because I don't want this to ever happen. And so what was happening was, this business owner that was operating out of Medina saw a building that was for sale and wanted to move their offices. He was over, growth, which is exciting, expansion, needed a full building for his team, and saw one down the road that was for sale. And he knew the owner. It's a small sort of community. And he said, love to buy your building. So they negotiated terms directly, and went down the street to the local title company that was, in their area, and set up the transaction. As the date's approving is approaching, he goes online, follows the instructions, approves a transfer of funds, gets the delivery truck going. They start loading up all the stuff to move all the furniture and equipment that they need to move into their new office space. It's a stressful but exciting day. I think we've all gone through moves and we know what that's like. And suddenly he gets a call from the seller saying, "How's everything going, buddy?" And he's like, "Oh, great. We're getting loaded up," and kind of giving the update of the day. And he said, "Well, I haven't received the funds yet." And as soon as that happened, his heart sank. He thought, "Oh my goodness, I've been scammed." So he goes immediately, gets off the phone, goes to his computer, goes to log in to check the thing, and then ring, ring, ring. The title agency is calling him. They said, "So sorry, Mr. So and so. We sent you the wrong routing number. Uh, no worries, though. We're transferring that money back. Go ahead and wire the money to this other account. We are so sorry for that inconvenience." And he paused for a minute and thought, "Well, he already went through that whole emotional roller coaster of I've been scammed." And he said, I'm just going to go over to the building. I'm just going to go in. I'm just going to go talk to somebody that I want to walk in and talk to somebody." And he did that. And as soon as he walked in, they said, "Yeah, we've been compromised. We've been hacked." And what happened was his money was transferred to the scammers' accounts, but the FBI put a freeze on that bank account, and they wanted him to transfer it again. They wanted to take another pass at it, and he caught it. So thankfully, he didn't lose a significant amount of money. He was paying cash for this building transaction. But it's a very real scenario where not only do you have to be careful, but you also have to make sure the people you're working with are careful, because if they get compromised, their legitimate accounts could be sending you improper instructions. And we've seen this a lot in the construction side of the world. Business owners, nonprofits, churches that are doing major renovations, they're getting scammed. Sometimes there's very low sophistication in place. Sometimes it's very sophisticated. One of the more sophisticated ones I've seen out there is, and we work with a number of construction and nonprofits. We have the whole gamut surrounded on that end of the equation. Is that one of our construction clients received an inquiry of a pending lawsuit. Said, looks like your account was compromised, and sent those similar scenario, but it was them that was compromised. We did the investigation, and it turns out that one of their third parties not their firm, a third party that was carbon copied on an email thread. That account was compromised from a third party. They took that email thread, replied as though they were the main person, say like a CFO or whatever have you, and sent out instructions to the individual as though they were resending it out. So they didn't actually have the account captured. They just spoofed it, which you can easily spoof anybody's email address. It's just when you reply, it goes to the correct one. And some people will spoof the exact email address to make it look like it's real. Others will change a one letter to, an O to a zero or an L to a one sort of a thing to just catch, miss someone's eye, careful eye. But in that instance, it wasn't the construction company that was compromised. It was some third party that was copied. I don't know if it was their legal firm or whatever have you. But unfortunate for the individual that was scammed, and also unfortunate for the individual whose account was compromised because now they're getting pulled into something that's legal. It's going to be litigated. But being very cautious on all those fronts is super important. So the question you might be having, okay, what do I do? Like, this is real. I get it. I understand it. So what do I do with this information? Well, I have a few things that I would recommend, and I love analogies. So I think of cyber resilience a lot like fire safety. Nobody wants to be in a fire. Having fire hydrants sitting around your house isn't exactly the most decor, extravagant thing that you want to have, but it serves a purpose, and you need to have it. So there's a few things that I like to throw into the mix here that is a really good analogy to help us all remember. Think of fire safety. The first thing is your identity, access, and control management. Control who gets in. So this is knowing what's flammable. So understand what are the things that the bad actors try to get into. How do they make these moves? You say, how do they get this email address? How are they doing these things? How are they sending out those false details and trying to trick people? Well, the first one is that identity and access management, your credentials, your username and password. We got to control who's getting in. So a lot of times, the easiest way they go about this is they'll send you an email and they'll say, click this link, and then it pulls up a login screen. And in that login screen, you put in your credentials. Now, some of the less fancy bad actors will put in a login screen that they've recreated where it's not the real address. The challenge is a lot of us are rightly and smartly using password protection tools. So password vaults and lockers. So if you've used like 1Password or LastPass or iCloud Keychain, these are all, or Google, these all have password vaults where it's protecting your password and it auto populates it in the login. And if it's not the right website, it's not chase.com, it's chasebanking.com, and it's not the real thing, it won't populate that password. So what do? Well, the bad actor's always looking. All right, if I'm getting 10% lost, 50%, 80%, 90%, 90% of the people aren't putting it in because it's not auto-populating, what do I do now? Well, here's what they do. They put a man in the middle. They actually have you click a link that goes to their web server and then forwards you over to the legitimate site. And then your password tool will put it in because it's presented the correct information. And when you put in that information, not only could they capture your username and password, which is bad enough, they can even capture a token. So let's say with a lot of banks, you log in and you present your username and password, but for extra layer of protocol safety, they will ask you to enter a PIN that is either text to you or is in an app, or even they push a notification to an app. If you've had that experience, that's a multi-factor authentication. That's another layer of protecting your identity. We all have that in some form or fashion in different places. The more that you can support that, the better. But that man in the middle will grab that token. It's like basically the hard key that lets them get in. And so you have to be extra cautious of the links you click on. So if you receive a notification from a bank or from a bill, it's very tempting to go into that email and click the link. My recommendation is go directly to the website. Do not click the links. It's easier, it's more convenient, but the bad actors will use convenience and ease to try to trick you. So avoid that path as much as possible and use a password protection. Those are the two number one things you can do to protect your identity. And if you do those two things, you're going to be a step above everyone else, and they're going after the easy targets. Also, knowing what's flammable, your endpoint devices. All of our computers and smartphones are endpoints, is what we call them in the tech world. And making sure that you have protection on those devices is super important. On the mobile devices, I will say they are very safe. They are far safer than laptops. I remember when mobile devices were first making their splash decades ago, and even 10, 15 years ago, a lot of corporate ITs were saying, oh, it's not safe, but they're far safer than Windows computers. They're much more locked down unless you bypass the default safety. And most of the people here in this room have no idea what that is or how to do it. Great, don't worry about it. But in the Google world, they call it rooting your device. In the Apple world, they call it jailbreaking the device. If you haven't done those things to your device, and you promise you would know if you had done it, you are in place with really good security. Still follow those same rules about links and any kind of sense of urgency. Don't click the links, go directly to the website to pay the bill, to enable a thing, or to log in general, as much as you can. The other endpoints are your laptops and computers. Now, those devices have a lot less strict rules around them. You can download anything from anywhere, and there's a lot more attachments that could be injecting bad code because those devices aren't as locked down. They're a lot more flexible, but they're also a lot more vulnerable. So making sure you have antivirus, anti-malware software just to protect your device. Again, they're going after your credentials, whether they're installing bad software on your computer to capture those keystrokes or redirect your DNS settings. When you type in an address, you could type in, such and such bank.com, and it'll redirect it to where they want. Those are the types of things if they can compromise your device. Another one I would say is if your device is compromised, if you're in a corporate environment, a business environment, work with your IT team to get that resolved as soon as possible. Don't think about doing this at a later date. It is an emergency. It's a fire. You don't say, "Oh, I'll put out the fire in the morning. I got to go to bed." You take care of it right away. And then the other piece is if it's a personal device, make sure you're taking care of it right away. Go to the Geek Squad, go to wherever, have somebody rebuild that machine and redo the operating system so it's not compromised. And the way you would know is if you see alerts from those software devices. There's a lot of really great tools out there. There's the old school McAfee's, Symantec, there's Trend Micro, many, many others that can help protect your device. Bitdefender, so many. And the last one is for businesses, particularly, make sure you have those smoke detectors. Those are the softwares that I'd mentioned. It's also the alerts that you could have on your accounts. So if you have a Microsoft 365 account for your business, make sure you're running Defender for identity. That's going to be a good thing that's going to protect and install smoke detectors. And the last one on that is keeping the extinguisher close. So 24/7 monitoring services. You can get this on the personal, but definitely get this on the professional level. 24/7 monitoring means that when an alert is received on your machine, even if you click close, it's sending that alert over to a security operations center. It's like calling the fire department. Even if the smoke detector is going off and you're like, I'm going to bed, if that smoke alarm is monitored, and it's going to try to reach you. And if it can, it's going to call the fire department. They're going to dispatch a fire truck to your house. That's what we want to have with 24/7 monitoring. So knowing what's flammable, your identity and your endpoints, and your network environment for that matter, install the smoke detectors, have the antivirus software, have the defender and protection on your identities, use password protection tools, and keep that at fire extinguisher close, meaning have support. Have a support team you can call. Know in advance if my computer, whether it's personal or professional, am I going to call if I have an issue? And is it going to have 24/7 monitoring for those security alerts? Very, very helpful to have. The next one I would talk about is, well, what do we do in terms of talking about cybersecurity? And there's a lot of innovation that's happening, especially with AI. And here's the other analogy I love to say is use the steering wheel and not the brake pedal. So what we want to make sure is that any software we're bringing in to your environment, whether you're installing it for your personal self or for your business, is make sure that it's being vetted from a cybersecurity perspective. Not all software is created equal. Even the software as a service that's cloud hosted is not all created equal. So make sure you're talking to your trusted advisors around whether or not this application has any known vulnerabilities or any other concerns that you would want to make an informed decision around. Because sometimes if you knew the whole picture, you may not make that purchase. It's like, well, I think it's a little bit better, or it's on sale. Make sure the software and the applications you're selecting are being properly vetted. There's also of a sort of like an internal term people are using now. It's called zero trust principles. What this essentially means is make sure that the software and the systems you have in place are giving the lowest amount of privilege possible, right? So the analogy I would use is if I have somebody that's going to come and they're going to clean my bathroom, I don't need maybe, and I could lock every room. I'm not going to give them access to every room. I'm going to give them access to the front door and to that bathroom to clean. I'm not going to give them the access to the kitchen or the cellar or any of those sorts of things. So zero trust principles means you're going to give only the limited amount of access that's necessary for them to do the job they need to do. That's both for external as well as internal people in your business. So not everybody needs access to your financials. We all know that. But also, there's a lot of files and folders that not everybody needs access to. Not everybody needs access to be able to see calendar information. You might ask, well, why is calendar information important? Well, if they need it, by all means, please do provision, share your calendar with people. But as an example, the bad actors, if that account is compromised, if your coworker's account is compromised, they know when you're flying, and then they can know when they can spoof you because you're in the air, maybe not checking email. There's things like that that we've seen that the less information that could be shared, that give everybody what they need to do their job, but don't give them anything more. And use automation. Automation is AI along with just pre-written instruction sets. Make sure that we're staying ahead of these bad actors. The real-time attacks are happening faster and faster. So what we want to do is make sure cybersecurity and all the things we're doing, we could pump the brakes and say, well, I'm going to slow down on everything. I'm not going to use AI. I'm not going to use these new tools. That's not what we want to do. We want to use the steering wheel, because if we keep the momentum, if we keep the pace, we're not going to fall behind the competition as business owners, as well as individuals in our own productivity. Cybersecurity is being baked into a lot of these tools. So we want to make sure we're leveraging that, navigating the risk appropriately, but still continuing to go forward. And the last thing I would say is not all AI and not all cybersecurity is equal. Some tools will bolt on AI or bolt on cybersecurity, but it's not built at its core foundation. And I love this image. It's like saying, well, I want to convert this soap to be liquid soap, and I'm just going to put a pump in it, right? Now it's exactly like you have over in your bathroom. No, bolting on cybersecurity and bolting on AI is about as ridiculous, not quite as, but about as ridiculous as this image. So make sure that the software and the tools that you are adopting are being properly vetted so you're making an informed decision and not buying the Dial bar soap when you really need that liquid soap in that environment. And with that, I'll hand it back over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fred. Let's move over to Jared.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Chelsea?
Yes.
All right. So thanks again for having me today. So again, my name is Jared Long. I am the Director of Treasury Management at Westfield Bank. So what I'm going to share today is some of the trends that we're seeing from the banking perspective. The Association of Financial Professionals, they always do an annual fraud survey, and I'd like to start out by sharing some of those results from that survey. So, one of the things that I wanted to touch on is 79% of organizations were victims of payment frauds or attacks in 2024. 79%. 70% of banks reported an increase of fraud over the past 12 months. And one of the things that we see on the banking side is fraud will sort of go in different waves. So we'll sort of go through a time where maybe ACH and wire fraud is a little bit more prevalent. We're seeing more of that, and then it'll sort of migrate and shift, and maybe it'll switch over to checks. And that's definitely the phase that we're in today. So check fraud is very, very prevalent with a lot of our clients. And 63% of the respondents reported that their organization faced check fraud in 2024. And one of the themes that we sort of heard today is there definitely is situations where it's very sophisticated. And then there's also situations where it's not so sophisticated. And I think check fraud sort of falls in that bucket. So, clients are sort of putting together, sort of checks or doing a check run just like they always do. They mail those checks out, going to different vendors. And then somehow, these fraudsters are getting the checks out of the mail. They are taking those checks and then adjusting the payee name. Maybe it's made payable to a business, and they adjust that payee name, make it payable to an individual, then deposit that check into an individual account. And it sort of is clearing that customer's account. And the problem is, unless the client is really going in and looking at that check image, they're not really seeing that the payee name has been changed. Because if they write check number 1,000 for $1,000, and they see that check clearing their account, the check number has not changed, the amount hasn't changed. They're thinking that that check was actually received by the vendor that it was supposed to go to. It's clearing their account. They received the check and then deposited it. But if they actually go in and look at the image, you can see that the payee name was changed from that business name to an individual. So that's definitely one of our recommendations to our clients is, as you're reconciling your accounts, making sure that you're actually going in and pulling up that image and making sure that nothing on that image has been changed. There is another tool to sort of help mitigate that risk for business clients, which I'll touch on in a later slide. Another issue is business email compromise. So what we're seeing from the banking side is, a customer will receive an email from one of their clients that says, hey, our banking information has changed. Here's our new banking information. Here's the updated routing number. Here's the updated account number. For any future invoices, please, if they're sending ACH payments, please send all payments to this updated information. Again, somebody's going in, getting control of that email, then, sending that email to the business, to a bank account, that they have access to. So again, one of our recommendations is, anytime there's any type of banking information changes, we always recommend that you call and have a conversation, with that client over the phone, just to verify that those changes are accurate. Let's verify the account number. Let's verify, the routing number that's been changed. So we talked about business email compromise. Another issue that we are seeing from the banking side is real-time payments. So real-time payments are definitely something that are becoming more and more popular. In some instances, if you're transferring money to another account, another bank, when you click that send button, it's basically leaving your account and then hitting that other account within seconds. So it's just making it that much more difficult for us as a bank to get involved and try to correct that fraudulent situation, because what we're seeing is once it leaves that account, it's going into the other account. The fraudsters are then grabbing that money and then pushing it over to another account. So everything is happening, so much more faster nowadays. It was already a tough job to begin with, and the speed of those payments is just making the collection efforts that much more tougher. Speaking of collection efforts, 22% of organizations were able to recover 75% or more of the funds lost, and that's a decrease of 41% from 2023. So again, definitely more fraud, sort of out in the banking system. And again, some of these situations are becoming more sophisticated, some not. But again, it is making a tough job that much tougher when it comes to collecting funds for any of these situations. Again, evolution of fraud. It's a persistent threat that we face on a daily basis, but it's also a little bit of a moving target. So, as fraud evolves, technology evolves. We sort of, as a bank, will come up with a way to sort of mitigate risk or sort of combat that fraud situation. And then there's a new wrinkle that's sort of thrown in that makes it that much harder. So we try to keep pace with the fraudsters, but in most cases they seem like they're one step ahead of us. So it's evolving and changing. Um, so detection methods, they have significantly improved through the years. But I feel like there's still a lot of business clients that are sort of relying on reactive methods instead of proactive methods. And the stakes are so much higher nowadays. Like we said before, the schemes are smarter, in the margin for error, in sort of identifying those fraudulent situations is getting harder and basically vanishing. Um, and I think the fraudsters, although they still are targeting individuals, they sort of have migrated more to the commercial side, just because I think commercial clients in some cases have a tendency to carry higher balances. So they want to go after those accounts that have the largest balances, just because if they get that opportunity, they have an opportunity to grab more cash. So definitely more of a shift. We definitely see it on the retail side. I'm not saying that, but we're seeing more of it on the commercial side over the last year or so. AI. So I think Fred sort of talked a lot about AI. That the AI is really enabling these fraudsters to come up with more creative ways to come after clients. I think Fred talked about being able to replicate somebody's voice. So in that previous slide, I sort of talked about sort of making that phone call and having that conversation. But again, in some cases that's hard. There's different things that we do sort of at the bank. We will send an RSA challenge as we're talking to somebody on the phone. So again, it's like that multi-factor where, sort of prior to that, we would verify, maybe a social security number, date of birth, some of that personal information. In today's world, the fraudsters are able to easily uncover that information. So, as we're having a conversation with somebody, we'll send them that one-time passcode, that they will give to us, and we'll plug into the system. And again, it's just another verification tool. We certainly can start with some of that personal information. But again, it takes multiple steps in some of these situations, just to make sure you're actually talking to who you or interacting with who you think that you are. The rapid pace of technology, innovation has really outpaced security. Again, I keep coming back to, we definitely have ways to mitigate fraud, but in this sort of world of technology and evolving AI, it is a challenge to stay out in front of it and making sure that we're doing everything that we can on sort of the back end. One of the things that we have at the bank is a system that sort of runs behind the scenes, and that system is looking for anomalies. So if the client generally doesn't do wire transfers, and we happen to see a large wire transfer going out, that will send alert to our risk team, and they'll reach out to somebody that, like the relationship manager or the account officer. They'll have that conversation with us and say, hey, this looks like it's a little bit outside their normal activity. Would somebody be willing to give that customer a call and just have that conversation, make sure it's legitimate before it leaves the bank? So, that was a big investment for us at the bank, but it really has done a great job. And the good thing is we do have the ability to update that system. So, customers' activity does change. It might be a business where, they have some seasonal activity, so we can update it to sort of reflect sort of the season that they're in, if their activity has changed. So mitigate the risk. As I'm working with clients, I really challenge them, to sort of come up with a process, when it comes to payments. Have a process in place that you're able to follow, sort of every situation that arises. So if somebody does happen to change, payment details, have a process in place of how you're going to confirm that actually, is the right account moving forward. I challenge clients to sort of look at their internal controls. And it really needs to be something that is viewed, a couple times a year, because like we've said so many times, fraud is changing and evolving. Our internal controls have to as well. So one of the things that we offer at the bank for our commercial clients is Positive Pay. So Positive Pay is a great tool for commercial clients to mitigate risk. And there's two different versions of Positive Pay. There's Check Positive Pay and then ACH Positive Pay. So the way that the Check Positive Pay works is, as a client does a check run, they take that information and upload it into the bank. So there's a file that contains the check number, who that check is made payable to, and the amount and the date that it's issued. So then as those checks are clearing the bank, it's going back and referencing that file that's been uploaded. So if there's ever a discrepancy between any one of those categories, the customer is notified first thing in the morning. They get an email notification that says that they have an exception. And then they go in and look and see if it's a check that's been issued. So sometimes what happens is, as checks are clearing the Fed, maybe there's another check that cuts off a digit or cuts off, a digit of the check number, one of the, the numbers in the amount. So it might appear to be an exception, but once they go in and look at the image, they can see that it's not. And then for ACH fraud, so any of the vendors that have the ability, the option to come in and take money or debit somebody's account, you can set that up where all those debits have to be reviewed. So I will have some clients that want to review all those debits before the debits are released and sent out. But then you also, have the ability or the option to set rules. So if you want to allow Verizon to come in and debit your account up to $1,000, that can go through without needing an approval. And then anything above and beyond, would need approval from the client. So again, just great tools that business customers can use to mitigate risk as much as possible. I think Fred touched on it, multi-factor. That's a great control to have in place. Generally, banks will have a couple different options. Sometimes they'll have it at login. Other times, if they're initiating an ACH or wire, that multi-factor is in place and that code has to be inputted before the payment's released. And then also, I think, just having multiple approvals required for larger payments is a good procedure to follow. So depending on the payment size, you can have one person that would come in and approve that transaction. If it's a larger payment, you can set it up where it requires another approval on top of that. And then the last thing is, talk to the experts. Really go out, get companies and other vendors involved to make sure that you're doing everything that you can do to protect, yourself, your bank accounts, and everything that is connected to that. Another good course of action is, meet with your banker on an annual basis. Sort of have a conversation. Are there accounts that are still open that aren't being used? Sort of review your account signers, making sure that they're still accurate and the right signers on the right accounts. I think one thing is, we do here at the bank is we spend a lot of time on cybersecurity. phishing and fraud prevention training. Making sure that you have a good program in place. To sort of remind clients. We have simulated emails that get pushed out to us. And if an employee is one of those employees that maybe struggles with those type of situations, and they're not indicating that appears to be a phishing email, then we're having those sidebar conversations. Maybe some additional training. But I think it really starts with senior leadership and gets pushed down. I think that Chelsea said at the beginning, we all sort of get into a rush. And we really need to be trained to slow down at times. We really need to sort of remind ourselves, if a client is in a rush to do something, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be as well. So it's okay to take a pause and really ask yourself, does this transaction make sense? Is it something that's sort of within their normal business activity? And if it's not, to just pause and sort of ask it additional questions.
Thank you, Jared.
Yep.
So key takeaways from today, I think it was just so fantastic that we got both the technical side, the business side, and then the personal side of this whole conversation. First and foremost, we know that cybersecurity really is a human issue. Having people that you trust that you can reach out to if there's something that you're concerned about, or between you and your advisory team, whether that's your banker, your financial advisor, your CPA, your attorney, having people who know you really well and develop that relationship where they can also help spot red flags or things that seem unusual is very crucial. And then being proactive with your security measures. Not only sort of reflexively saying, oh, that might be a scam, some sort of scam email, I'm going to delete that, but what can I do to better protect myself? I'm a huge fan of analogies, and I thought Fred's analogies were great with knowing what's flammable, identifying what's burning and dealing with it immediately, and then of course protecting for the future. And then I think the most important takeaway to understand is that fraud really is ever evolving, ever escalating, and so it's important to not only keep up with things, but apply a healthy level of skepticism across the board with things that you run into. So with that, we're going to conclude our presentation, but take some time for some questions today, if there are any, and make sure that we can address them. So I'll give a couple minutes, and if you'd like to ask something in the chat, just let us know. All right. Give y'all one more minute. All right. And in the interest of time, we will conclude here. This is going to be available post-recording to share. I think this is something on a personal level to make sure that this is a family conversation, from especially for those sandwich generation people who might be taking care of elderly parents, or and might have those more tech savvy younger children that can kind of explain, up, mom, dad, that's AI for sure. Make sure that these sort of conversations are being had regularly. And again, keep in contact with your support network. It's very crucial for us as your advisors, or these professionals that you can count on, that we know if something is off, that there's somebody that we can contact with your permission to say, hey, something doesn't feel quite right here. Is this person okay? We want to make sure that we're always looking out for you. With that, we will go ahead and conclude. Thank you so much, Fred and Jared, for your time today. Thanks, everybody, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.